Bloodline of the Sun God, SSR level. After the exchange is successful, you will gain the divine power of the Sun and become the Supreme God. The exchange price, 100 million achievement points, 100 million potential points. Superman Bloodline, SR level. After the exchange is successful, you will become an omnipotent Superman. The exchange price, 50 million achievement points, 50 million potential points. These two must look great together. In the new semester, Locke, as usual, looked at the two bloodlines in the mall and thought so. The Sun can make himself possess the divine power of the Sun, and Superman seems to rely on the Sun to become stronger. If these two are combined, the effect should not be as simple as 1 plus 1. Anyway, Locke is pondering, it will definitely not be addition, and at worst, it should be multiplication. Every time I look at these two bloodlines, I have to say that Locke feels that he has unlimited power. At least, there is hope of becoming immortal. As for the exchange price, Locke is not afraid that his price is expensive, but he is afraid that he does not have a price. If there is a price, at least it is clearly marked. As long as he improves every day, he will be able to save enough sooner or later. Brave Locke, not afraid of difficulties. But name, Locke Broughton, Sole Player Achievement Point, 2000, can be used to purchase items in the Achievement Mall. Potential points, 3000, can be used to upgrade own skills. Talent, tenacity, level 3, your physical fitness and recovery ability will be greatly improved. Skills, driving, beginner, English, grade 8, history, grade 8, mathematics, grade 8, shooting, intermediate, sniper, advanced. Current mission daily task, mock exam. Basic rewards for task completion, achievement points 500, potential points 500. Mission note, you are a player, and the only thing that can affect you is rewards, not feelings. As a transfer student, whether you choose to be clumsy or to be a blockbuster is up to you, your game, you call the shots. I hope there are more tasks that can be triggered in New York City. He needs more achievement points and potential points, but the system will not force the release of tasks. Any task needs to be triggered by himself, which is why Locke transferred to New York. Without him, there are many New Yorkers. More people means more task triggers. There are many tasks, which means that after completion, there are more achievement points and potential points that can be obtained. The achievements and potential points mean that he is one step closer to redeeming the blood of the Sun God. Have a look. I just transferred to another school, so I have a mock test task. If I change to my previous school, I would take the test once a semester. But it is also understandable. In the past, the school pursued happiness education, but after the transfer, it pursued quality education. Happy education cultivates garbage, and quality education cultivates elite. Understandable. Locke sat in his seat and looked at the classmates around him. Just from the first impression, he could clearly feel the gap with his school in Texas. It is indeed a midtown high school full of talents. But what about the little spider? Speaking of which, shouldn't the little spider also be from Midtown High School? Could it be that I don't have him in this version? Locke watched not far away, the girl with blonde hair, a pretty face, and a sweet smile blinked her eyes. This is Gwen Stacy, right? What about the little spider? There was Gwen, who was chatting with his girlfriends about the harvest of the holiday. Out of the corner of the eye, he saw Locke, who had his eyes on him, and looked curiously over there, sitting quietly in his seat, wearing a casual suit jacket. With short, broken blonde hair, and looks like Locke who doesn't match his age and maturity. Kem, that classmate. You said he seemed to be a transfer student from Texas. Yes. Okay. Gwen listened to her best friend's words, nodded thoughtfully, thought about it, got up, and walked towards Locke. Locke raised his eyebrows inadvertently and looked at Gwen who was approaching. Hello. Gwen walked in front of Locke and stretched out his hand with a smile. My name is Gwen, the 9th grade student assistant. If there is anything you don't understand, please feel free to ask. I will try my best to help you. Locke. Locke shook hands with Gwen and said, I just transferred, thank you, Gwen. You are welcome. Ask me if you don't understand anything. Thanks, I will. Gwen smiled, looked at the teacher who walked in, and returned to his seat. She is a student assistant in the 9th grade, helping every student have a good learning experience, which is what she should do. But I don't know how this student Locke's academic performance is. Gwen sat in the seat and watched Locke, who got up under the guidance of the math teacher and introduced himself with a light expression. 10 minutes later. After the teacher introduced the new members of Locke, the math teacher who came in directly said that the holiday was over, but the fun could not stop. Come and have a good time with the mock test. Moment. The classroom is boiling. The academic gods, like Gwen, look forward to it. The scumbags wailed like those muscular gorillas. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. Sure enough. This is the normal learning atmosphere. It's very similar to Texas. Good guy, learning is all about interest, and making friends is the theme. If it weren't for Locke's 2 people, his self-control was not bad, I'm afraid it would be damaged. But this test paper. Locke raised his eyebrows when he saw the test paper he got. Is this the gap between trash white high schools and elite white high schools? How about it? The math teacher walked up to Locke. Aren't you a little uncomfortable? Locke looked up at the math teacher and shook his head. He has not adapted to this world for 16 years, and even if he is not adapted, he has already adapted. Only for the reward. Dark blue. Nonsense. System, upgrade math. Ding. It will cost 1,000 potential points to upgrade mathematics, grade 8, to mathematics, grade 9. Are you sure to upgrade? Sure. Ding. The upgrade is successful, I wish players a happy game. Whether the game is pleasant or not, Locke doesn't know, all he knows is that he feels a little distressed. But any investment in yourself is worthwhile, an investment is for better returns. Along with the rapidly flushing new knowledge in the sea of consciousness, about 9th grade mathematics, he opened his memory palace, and then he entered his memory palace in a row. Are you looking at the test paper in your hand? So simple and easy. Game life, game life. If the game can't be opened, then the game will be meaningless. On the first day of the transfer, Locke felt the gap between colleges and universities. On this day, Locke directly upgraded the mathematics and English of the potential points he had finally accumulated. After all, if he didn't upgrade, it would be amazing to get a basic reward this time. But investing in itself is not a loss. Locke is not the kind of frog at the bottom of the well. He can feel that in Midtown High School, I am afraid that such sudden exams are not rare, and every exam will become his daily task. As long as you take the exam twice, you can get back the potential points you spend. Then, the other exams in the 9th grade this semester will be purely earned. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Locke walked out of the college application counselor's office. In the Commonwealth, the matter of going to college, in fact, has been prepared from the moment he first entered the college, but Locke has not yet decided which college to go to. Locke. Gwen. Locke took out his backpack from the cabinet and was about to leave when he heard a voice and looked at Gwen, who was holding a book in his arms. It should be to go to college preparatory courses, the so-called AP courses. Through AP courses, students can take college credits in advance, but the school does not make mandatory requirements, and students choose voluntarily. Because Locke has just arrived, he hasn't made up his mind yet, so he hasn't decided yet. Gwen looked at Locke, who took out his backpack and smiled. Aren't you going to join the club? Locke shrugged, just here, let's take a look and make a decision. Gwen nodded and invited with a smile, if you are interested, you can join our chemistry experiment group. Locke said with a smile, I need to take a look first, you know, after all, this is a new environment, I just moved from Texas, and I'm going to take a look at the house this afternoon. Gwen was stunned for a moment, you didn't in New York. I'm an orphan, said Locke. Gwen's expression changed slightly, oh, sorry, Locke, I'm not. Locke smiled, it's okay, it's not bad to be alone. Reincarnation is a technical job. Especially the Commonwealth. Compared with that kind of uncertain family, orphans are a constant starting point, and there is no need to worry about encountering a bad family, or something else. Do you need my help? Okay. Gwen smiled, opened her locker, took out her backpack, looked at Locke, and said, I'm old New York, and helping my classmates is what my student assistant should do, let's go. Very enthusiastic. Locke looked at Gwen who flicked his ponytail, the picture was filled with such a happy decision, and blinked. What's the situation? Although I am an orphan, I am not poor. But... Locke looked at Gwen, who turned to greet him, with a sweet smile on his face, opened his mouth, and walked out. By the way, little spider, where did you go? Locke returned to his senses, picked up his backpack, and thought curiously in his heart. Did I remember it wrongly? By the way, what's your budget? What? The budget for renting. Gwen, who walked out of the school gate with Locke and enthusiastically helped his classmates, said, the City Hall has a certain rental subsidy for students who need to rent a house in Midtown University, and if there is a location in the welfare apartment, there is also a great discount. Locke said directly, actually, before I came to New York, I was optimistic. Before he decided to transfer to New York, he could contact the house. He originally planned to come earlier, but he was delayed by the incident, which led to him arriving in New York this morning, and because it was the first day of the report, he could not just skip class. So? Yes. Gwen asked curiously, where is it? Oak Tree Apartments. Locke shook his head and stopped a taxi, what's the name? Sing Chen Building. What? Gwen blinked, looking at Locke who helped her open the rear door, a little dazed. Star Building? Is it the one on 5th Avenue? 15 minutes later. 5th Avenue. Locke got out of the car, took out his mobile phone, and called the contacted real estate agent. Gwen, who was next to him, looked at the legendary Star Building in New York in front of him, blinked his eyes, and then couldn't help looking at Rock who hung up the phone next to him. Isn't he an orphan? Gwen was greatly confused. At this time, an agent in a suit and leather shoes with shiny hair came from not far away, saw Locke at a glance, and trotted over, full of smiles, Mr. Broughton. Locke looked at the intermediary who passed through the video, and shook hands. Hello, Mr. Oren, sorry for your troubles. The agent named Oren had a smile on his face. No trouble, let's go up, Mr. Broughton. Although Locke is a little young. But Oren has verified the capital and confirmed that Locke is not the kind of boring high school student, but the kind with such economic strength, and even the desire to buy. If this order is sold, the commission will be huge. Locke looked at Gwen next to him. Let's go. Gwen recovered and nodded. She felt that her cognition of the word orphan appeared to be a little off. 28th floor. Indoor area, Uyuganshu www.uyuganshu.com 200 square meters, 2 floors up and down, duplex structure. The previous owner refitted a full set of Stark Smart Home system half a year ago. All furniture and electrical appliances are complete. As long as signed today, can move in today, exactly what Mr. Broughton said on the phone. Locke put his school bag on the high-end sofa beside him, pushed open the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, and walked to the terrace with a private swimming pool. Opposite is Central Park. Gwen was standing in the living room, looking at the furniture and appliances in the house, and then, once again, felt very unscientific looking at Locke, who was standing on the terrace with his back to her, looking at the central apartment with his hands on his back. Are orphans already so arrogant these days? Good. Here it is. Locke looked at the triangular-shaped building not far away, and secretly said. Originally, he was still a little hesitant, but for some unknown reason, after entering the Xing Chen building, it seemed that this hesitation disappeared. Here it is. Locke turned around, looked at Oren over there, took out a bank card from his arms, and handed it over, swiped the card. Oren's eyes lit up. Gwen completely widened her mouth. Really buy it? Ding sound. Gwen was completely confused with the consumption voucher that came out of the card machine. Oren respectfully returned the bank card to Locke. Okay, Mr. Broughton, I will prepare the change data as soon as I go back, and I will send the data to you 3 days later. Locke nodded. This brush completely squandered his savings from fighting for so many years in Texas. Never mind. After the money is gone, you can make more money. In life, comfort is the first priority. Gwen. What? After the real estate agent Oren left, Locke looked at Gwen, who was standing there in confusion. After shouting, he looked at Gwen who had recovered, and smiled. Thank you, Gwen. Gwen was slightly taken aback. A good family and a good education gave her the ability to quickly stabilize herself. Thank me for what? I didn't help much. Originally it was. I also planned to help the new classmate introduce an apartment. Result. This new friend just waved his pen. Good guy, he just bought a set. Too arrogant. This guy isn't lying to me, is he? Not an orphan at all, but a child of a rich family. Locke looked at the expression on Gwen's face and smiled. This is the legacy my parents left me. After I bought this house, there is not much left, but I have to start over. Sorry, that's not what I meant. Fine. Locke smiled and said, actually, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made up my mind so quickly. To express my gratitude, I would invite you to a meal to express my gratitude. But I didn't help you. You have. Locke said sincerely, when I came to New York, you were the first friend I knew. Let me know that New York is warm. Gwen looked at the sincere Locke and opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. She feels that if she rejects Locke, she will make the new classmate think that New York City is not only problematic, but also cold. So. Gwen hesitated for a while, then looked at Locke. Just for dinner. Locke nodded. Yes, just to express my gratitude. It's not like dating. Gwen breathed a sigh of relief. The place where Locke treats guests to dinner is not far away. It's on 5th Avenue. When he just came over by taxi, Locke saw a nicely decorated restaurant. He doesn't care about what he eats. But Locke likes wine, especially bourbon, but it is impossible to buy wine through formal channels if you are under 21 years old, and restaurants will not sell you wine. Unless this restaurant wants to close down. Although it was a bit early to eat at 5 o'clock, the restaurant opened at 5 o'clock, which means it is normal. Okay. Gwen, who was sitting opposite, bit the egg in his hand, and his eyes lit up. This tastes very good. Locke smiled and said, next time you have the opportunity, come over together. Gwen raised his head and looked at Locke with a smile on his face. Classmate Locke, is it a date next time? Locke's eyes were clear. Everything is fine. Gwen. What do you call everything? What kind of answer is this? Out of the restaurant. Gwen plans to go home. Just. Gwen. A police car flashed in front of him, and then it fell back directly. After the co-pilot's window was about to come down, a man sitting in the co-pilot appeared in the sight of Locke and Gwen. Locke raised an eyebrow. Gwen was also slightly taken aback. Dad. Sheriff George Stacy stepped out of the police car, his eyes turning on his daughter and Locke next to him. Good guy. Suddenly, a wild boar appeared when he was dozing off. Gwen also quickly reacted from her daze, and introduced to her father, Dad, this is Locke, a classmate who just transferred from school today. Seeing this, Locke also stretched out his hand, hello. George glanced at the right hand that Locke handed over, hesitated for a while, shook hands, and squeezed out a smile, hello. Half a sound. Gwen and Locke said goodbye, got into George's police car, and left Locke's sight. After half an hour, Gwen's house came back. As a full-time housewife, Helen looked at her husband and daughter who walked in and said with a smile, go wash your hands and eat right away. Gwen responded. George said directly, your daughter just came back from a big meal. Gwen turned to look at George and stomped, Dad. He had already explained it on the way back. Helen looked at her daughter and looked at George curiously, what's going on? George took off his uniform, ask your daughter. Helen looked at Gwen, Gwen. Gwen was a little speechless, Mom, it's a new classmate. I went with him to find the apartment, and then, as a thank you, he invited me to a meal, it's that simple. Helen nodded, not feeling anything strange. George laughed and said, ask again, the apartment that the classmate was looking for. Gwen looked at George helplessly again, and then, meeting his mother Helen's eyes, sighed, the Star Building. Helen raised her eyebrows and looked at George. The Star Building is famous in New York City. Your classmate? Locke is an orphan. Okay. Gwen sighed, the money for the house is the inheritance left to him by Locke's parents. Again, this is not a date. I'm full. I'll go back to my room first. Said. Gwen walked directly towards the stairs on the second floor. Helen looked at George. George also shook his head. Gwen didn't tell the situation when he was in the car. If this is the case, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com can explain it. Think about it a lot. Helen and George looked at each other, and then Helen walked directly into the kitchen. Your daughter is angry, you are responsible for putting out the fire you start. Obviously. My daughter must have said nothing because she didn't want to expose her classmates' privacy. George opened his mouth and touched the back of his head, Cocoa, what about hot cocoa? The daughter is angry. If 1 cup of hot cocoa can't solve the problem, then 2 cups. George already had experience with this. Star Building. Locke retrieved the courier and returned to the apartment he just bought and stayed in. Hiss. After unpacking, a suitcase appeared in sight. Open. Into the eye. 2 stacks of 100 continental gold coins lie quietly in it. There is also a notebook that cannot be seen on the market at all. After Locke took out the notebook, he opened it, and then waited for the notebook to turn on, got up, and walked towards the second floor of the apartment with the notebook. In the library, Locke locked the gold coins in the safe and sat down at the computer desk. Soon after the laptop was successfully connected to the internet, a page popped up. Please verify your identity. Unparalleled. Verification succeeded. After a mechanical voice came out, on the side of the page, a piece of information was quickly refreshed and passed. Locke blankly looked at the name information on the screen. Right hand. A Colt M1911A1 pistol fitted with a silencer stands out. About 2 years ago, in the Federation's killer circle, a killer codenamed Wu Shuang appeared in everyone's sight. In just 2 years, he received more than 50 missions. From Texas smugglers, to Texas ecstasy, to Texas black gangsters. 50 missions, none failed. Even so far, I have never seen the true face of this warrior killer, but it is certain that no matter how heavily guarded those targets are, they will eventually die. Locke. It is unparalleled. No way. He was an orphan in this life. Don't think that because there are so many minor protection laws, children in the Federation live like a paradise. That's utter nonsense. The so-called children's paradise is built entirely on middle-class families. Orphans? The treatment is not even as good as the children at the bottom. At the very least, the children at the bottom also have families, and they will not meet those disgusting men who just want to use orphans to cheat subsidies, or have ulterior motives for children, even boys. Locke chose to support himself. In the case of not enough age and education, if you want to get rich quickly, there is no doubt that the killer is a very good choice. Locke has no psychological pressure. What morality? What good and evil? Duty Miao has passed through, and Locke has long stopped believing in this thing. Even if he is to be judged, only the people can judge him. In this world, no one can judge his view of right and wrong. Not to mention, killers are also a good way to quickly accumulate achievement points and potential points. And still make money? Why not do it? Again. Locke's target for taking orders is not that kind of good person. Although Locke sometimes sees this world as a game, it is a real world, but he feels that he is out of tune with this world. But no matter what, Locke abides by his own moral bottom line. Don't kill good people. Moreover, if the person receiving the order is a good person, the system will not turn this assassination operation into an assassination mission. Pfft. Boom. Mission completed. Assassination mission, Allenwood quest reward, achievement points 300, potential points 300. Locke, who was wearing the sunglasses produced by the system, supported the target this time, and helped it to the corner of the wall. Then, he took out a small card with his crime written in his arms, put it in the arms of the target mission, and then turned to enter. In a dark alley. After a while, along with a scream, a street girl with a benefactor who was planning to come to this alley to solve the problem saw the target's body and let out a harsh scream. Star building. Locke took the mobile phone, connected it to the computer, and transmitted the evidence of the target's death to the system of the Continental Hotel. After a while, the computer screen changed. A line of words appeared above. After receiving and confirming that it is correct, the bounty of 100,000 will be paid automatically. Thank you for your service and support, Peerless. You are welcome. The corners of Locke's mouth curved slightly, and he said softly, he closed the computer, and drank the bourbon in the cup in front of him. As expected of the Big Apple. It really deserves to be the ideal holy land for quests. When I was in Texas, whether it was a daily mission or an assassination mission, there were very few. Nowhere like New York. On the first day of my arrival, there was only one daily mission, and there were even more assassination missions. If it weren't for the fact that he was a newcomer, Locke felt that he could have accepted all the hundreds of orders placed by the Continental Hotel. The next day, after Locke got up, the 100,000 bounty from the Continental Hotel was paid as promised. However, when the money was transferred and came to Locke's shriveled bank card legally, it was only 80,000 yuan. After all, the bounty does not include money laundering costs. Midtown High School. In the student hallway, Locke greeted Gwen who arrived before him. Good morning, Gwen. He looked into Peter Parker last night. There is this person. But Peter Parker attended City College in Queens, not Midtown College. This is amazing. Locke once thought that he had found the wrong person, but the data told him that it was like this, and there was nothing wrong. Could Peter Parker be a transfer student too? Gwen also said hello to Locke, then closed the cabinet and walked towards the stairs. Locke smiled and didn't care. He came to New York for only one purpose. Brush tasks. Work the task. Strive for 3 years in advance to exchange the blood of the sun and the blood of the Superman, and then lie down and be an immortal salted fish. At the moment, women will only affect the progress of his quests. When Locke came to the classroom where he taught English, after the teacher came in, there was a ding, and the task of the mock test yesterday was also completed. Mission completed. Daily task, mock exam task reward, score A+, triple reward, achievement point 1500, potential point 1500 NES. Name, Locke Broughton, sole player achievement point, 3800, can be used to purchase items in the achievement mall. Potential points, 2800, can be used to upgrade own skills, driving, beginner, English, grade 9, history, grade 9, mathematics, grade 9, shooting, intermediate, sniper, advanced. Current quests, none at the moment. The system does not issue any mandatory quests. All quests in UU Reading www.uugonshu.com are explored by players in daily life, and corresponding quests are generated according to players' remarks. Game life, happy game, I wish players a happy game. Locke looked at the and paper in his hand and raised his eyebrows. Sitting next to Locke with one hand on his forehead, Gwen, who glanced at Locke's paper from the corner of his eye, was slightly surprised. Locke felt the gaze beside him and turned to look. Exactly. It collided with the gaze delivered by Gwen. Eyes facing each other. Gwen stared at Locke, who was 3-pointed handsome, 3-pointed unrestrained, 3-pointed extraordinary, and 1-point mature. A trace of panic flashed in his eyes, and then a smile. You did well in the test. Locke smiled. My luck has always been good. Gwen. He knew the gap between himself and Gwen. Gwen got A and by strength. Locke got the A and by relying on plugins. If you don't rely on plugins, Locke feels that it is already very good to get a C by himself. After class, Locke stopped Gwen and asked curiously, Gwen, which pre-course did you take? Gwen. He was a native of the East in his previous life. Federal. Never came. Dongguo's University, he knows Menking, the Federal University, just like everyone else, only knows a name, so, which university to choose to continue the task, Locke is confused. But Gwen is an academic god. It doesn't matter if he doesn't, anyway, he has a plugin, and he will follow behind the of learning, there will definitely be no problem. And generally, students will hide their college intentions very well, and will not tell others easily, so as not to be robbed of his college after being known by others. But Gwen is different. Gwen is the of learning. For the of learning, only the of learning has always chosen the university. It has never been the of learning. Locke didn't want to be the same as Gwen, but it was better to follow the of learning and learn something than to think blindly. Gwen looked at Locke curiously, and seemed to be thinking about something, but she told Locke about several AP courses she took. But Gwen reminded, it's best to focus on your high school credits. Locke wrote down a few courses that Gwen said, and smiled, thank you. Credits don't matter. The mission is the key. Shueshen likes to take exams. If there are exams, there will be tasks. He has no talent for learning, but he has cheats. No matter what, it is good to earn some money. In the afternoon, Locke found a college counselor and asked if he could take these prerequisite courses. Then, Gwen, who was taking a chemistry class, looked at Locke who came in and was a little confused. Hi. Hi. Gwen returned to her senses, and she wondered if it was a coincidence. Locke, who was placed next to her again, coughed and responded, calmed down, and focused her energy on the textbook. As always, Gwen, the of studies, was attentive. Shwezalak is listening to heavenly books. But system upgrade. After spending 1,000 potential points together and upgrading his chemistry knowledge to the 8th grade, Locke felt that he could understand a little bit. After spending 1,000 potential points again, he finally understood. Locke felt a little distressed. But when the task came, Locke felt that the effort was worth it. Ding! The task is being generated. Basic rewards for missions, achievement points 500, potential points 500. Following the assignment by the chemistry teacher, the task arrived as scheduled. I like. Locke thought to himself. Only. Locke rubbed his brows with some headache. In other words, this assignment seems to require the cooperation of two people. Where can I find cooperation? Gwen looked at Locke, who had a strange expression next to him. Gwen, who was as smart as Gwen, immediately understood why. Hey! Okay. Want to be together? Is it okay? Gwen shrugged and put away her books. Chem is on leave today, can you find anyone else? Locke looked around, almost all of them could be paired, and looked at Gwen. Thank you. Then let's go to my house. Too fast. Gwen looked at Locke, who was standing there. What's the matter? Locke recovered and shook his head. He began to think about whether he could change the prerequisite courses, otherwise, he seriously doubted that he would be shot dead by Sheriff George Stacy. Never mind. Mission first. Parking lot. Diddy. This is your car. Gwen blinked and looked at the silver-white Audi R8 flashing in front of her. At noon, she heard her classmates say, "Is this R8 yours?" Locke turned on the co-pilot and nodded, "Yes, I went out at noon and just bought it. Don't worry, I have a driver's license." In March this year, when Locke was 16 years old, he immediately took the driver's license test. But after buying this R8 again, he is really running out of money. I'm going to take orders again tonight to make money. Gwen glanced at Locke in surprise. Although it was not a good idea to think so, she really wanted to know how much legacy Locke's parents left to Locke. 10 minutes later. Under the shocked and envious gazes of the teenagers, the news that Locke, who had just transferred to another school for less than 2 days, immediately went after their goddess Gwen. After half an hour, Locke parked the car on the side of the road, and then went home with Gwen. After an hour, Sheriff George Stacy, who received news from his wife Helen, returned home in a hurry. Where? Learning. Helen looked at her husband's expression and said quickly, "Don't bother them, it seems like some homework that needs to be done." George Stacy was in disbelief. Helen quickly changed the subject, "Are you busy today?" George waved his hand, walked to the second floor, and went to Gwen's room. He didn't speak. Hearing all kinds of messy terms from inside, he returned to the first floor with some doubts. "Don't mention it. Sin Hunter is coming to New York." Helen looked at George. "Is that what you said last time, the crime hunter who is active in Texas?" Sin Hunter is the code name given by the police department. Sometimes George would talk to Helen about his work, so it was normal for Helen to know. Yesterday, Alan Wood was found dead in an alley, and the crime of the hunter used the same method and found the crime card. No, the police station is busy flying today. On the one hand, to find the sin hunters. On the other hand, it is to investigate Alan Wood. The Texas Police Department has spent 2 years confirming one thing. As long as the crime is written by the crime hunter, it has finally been confirmed that it does exist. Fortunately, sin hunters have always been active in Texas. Fortunately, the New York Police Department discovered it early, otherwise, every newspaper in New York City would have made headlines about the crime hunters coming to New York. Helen nodded and walked towards the kitchen. "I think this sin hunter is pretty good." George snorted twice. "Where the law, my dear?" Helen shrugged. She just said that, without thinking about convincing George. Anyway, she felt pretty good. Especially after listening to George talking about what Alan Wood's crime was, he felt that if it was true, then this Alan Wood was guilty. George looked at his wife, ready to convince her. At this time, "Mom! Dad!" Gwen walked down the stairs, looked at George in the living room, and blinked. "Why are you back?" George laughed. "Can't I come back?" Gwen quickly waved his hand and said to Helen in the kitchen, "Mom, Can Locke stay for dinner today? George. Actually, Locke didn't want to stay. But the kindness is difficult. However, after Locke sat down at the dining table and saw the unsmiling Sheriff George Stacy sitting across from him, he regretted it a little. Didn't Gwen say that George is very busy today? Locke, here it is. Thank you, ma'am. Locke took the plate handed over by the smiling Helen and said thank you. In general, Locke is very polite. Although he was an orphan in this life, he was not in the previous life, and the upbringing of the previous life was placed there. You are welcome. Helen said, and don't call me Mrs. just call me Helen. You are the first male classmate Gwen brought home. Gwen, who was sitting across from the two younger brothers, was a little speechless. Mom. She was just in good intentions. Helen laughed and said to Locke, I hope you can get used to it. Locke looked at the perch on the plate. This. It is the legendary lemon sea base. Good guy. Did you eat it the day after you came to New York? Little spiders don't have this kind of treatment, right? Cough cough. George, who was sitting across from him, coughed a little unhappily. So, Locke, where are you from? Gwen frowned. Dad. Locke is an orphan, so ask, isn't it exposing Locke's scar? Locke and Gwen smiled and said to George, Texas. Anyway, when he opened his eyes, he was in Texas. It is also a member of the Lone Star State. George took a bite of lemon sea base, then do you know Sin Hunter? Dad. Knowledge. Locke opened the perch and smiled, I'm afraid there are people from Texans who don't know him. Of course he knew who the guilty hunter was. Anyway, no one would associate the 16-year-old with the famous crime hunter. After all, according to the profile of the FBI, the crime hunter was a middle-aged man between 25 and 35 years old. He was only 16. Cute age. George just asked casually. After all, he had to find something to talk about. Otherwise, would he just watch this guy enter the house and take his cabbage away by the roots? How is this possible? George asked again, what do you think of Sin Hunter? Without any hesitation, Locke shrugged, murderer. George's eyes lit up and he looked at Locke. Okay. Not crooked. Locke said, although many people say that he is the judge of darkness, killing is killing. This cannot be changed, even if it is a wicked person. George nodded. For some reason, he suddenly didn't hate Locke so much. Locke himself thought so. But, after thinking about it, this didn't affect him in the slightest. Because he also agreed with one sentence. When the law fails to give justice to the victim, from that moment on, the lynching trial will become just and honorable. But Locke didn't say this. He was invited by Gwen to have dinner, not to play in the ring. Locke is not that stupid. Going against George will only embarrass Gwen, who invited him to stay for dinner, and make George and Helen feel that Gwen has a poor eye for making friends and doesn't even know basic manners. Opinions can be said in private. But not at the dinner table. Okay. Although this lemon sea base looks similar to looking up at the stars, it tastes delicious. Period. George asked some other questions, and Locke answered them very generously. The answer is neat. At the very least, looking at Helen's face and George's increasingly calm face, it was obvious that maybe Locke had a bad impression on George at first, but during this meal, the first impression was reversed. Especially after Gwen told George and Helen that Locke got his test results yesterday. In Gwen's room. After Locke and Gwen worked out the final data together, Locke also planned to leave. The daily tasks are done, you can go to the night tasks. Today I'm going to brush too. Thanks. After locking his backpack, he said to Gwen, thank you, Gwen. Gwen was a little helpless, you said too much thank you. In just 2 days, Gwen dared to swear that all the thanks she heard in the last semester, added up, was not as much as Locke told her in these 2 days. He must have had a bad time as a child. Gwen had serious doubts. After all, if it weren't for that, it couldn't explain why Locke liked to say thank you so much. Locke smiled. Politeness should never be underestimated, right? Gwen raised her eyebrows and looked at Locke. So, you've always been polite, but you're not. Locke looked at Gwen. So smart. Gwen thought of what was on the table and looked at Locke. I think Sin Hunter is pretty good. Locke raised an eyebrow. Is this bait? I've also seen reports about Texas crime hunters. If it wasn't for the crime hunters, there would be no way for so many wicked people to get the punishment they deserve. Yes. Is not it? Gwen folded her arms. Do you really think the Sin Hunter is a murderer? Locke's answer was the same as the one at the dinner table just now, only with a few more words. Legally speaking, he is a murderer. What about not legally speaking? Locke thought for a while. Then he can't get along with good people. You reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Okay. Anyway, he is definitely not a good person. Locke knew himself, but he didn't plan to be a good person. In this Marvel universe, being a good person has only one end, that is, he doesn't even know how to die. Just like the Stacy family, whose family was ruined because of the little spider. George Stacy died because of the little spider. Gwen also died because of the little spider. That's what it's like to be a good guy in the Marvel universe. Anyway, whoever likes to be a good person, Locke doesn't intend to be a good person. I go first. Locke smiled at Gwen, carried his backpack, and left the room. Gwen came back to her senses. I'll take you off. In a polite way to send. In the living room. Locke said to George and Helen, who were watching TV in the living room, Mr. Stacy, Mrs. Stacy, thank you for your invitation. The lemon sea base is delicious. Thank you. I'll go first. Gwen said to George and Helen, Mom, I'll go down and deliver. Go downstairs. Locke took out the car key and pressed it. On the opposite side, the car beeped twice. Gwen and Locke walked to the car together. See you tomorrow. Locke opened the car door and prepared to get in the car. See you tomorrow. At this time, Locke's ears moved slightly, raised his eyebrows, and looked up at the dark sky. Gwen asked curiously, What's wrong? The next second, Locke's face changed slightly, grabbed Gwen, and walked directly across the road. Behind. Boom. What? Boom. Almost at the moment Locke took Gwen and turned around and ran away, the corpse fell from the sky with a bang, almost like an intercontinental missile. The precise and fixed bang landed on the Audi R8 that Locke had just purchased for less than 7 hours. Moment. Boom. The roof of the Audi R8 shriveled in an instant. Then, with a bang, the 4 windows of the car were shattered directly, hitting all directions like the shock wave generated by the explosion of a grenade. Get out of the way. Locke looked at Gwen with a shocked expression, and with a tug and a thud, he took Gwen directly to the ground. Poof. Puff puff. At home, George Stacy, who suddenly heard the sound of a grenade exploding, rushed out with a gun. Then, George saw the 2 people lying on the side of the road. Gwen is down. Locke is on top. Then, WTF? 10 minutes later. Whoa whoa whoa. Police car. Ambulance. The entire road was filled in unison. In an ambulance. Gwen nervously looked at Locke, who was undergoing debridement and disinfection of the wound on his forehead, and looked at the doctor. Doctor, how is it? Is Locke okay? Locke waved his hand. It's okay, scratches. This little injury won't kill him. At this moment, Sheriff George Stacy and his colleagues in the police station are focusing their attention on the stump on the roof of the Audi R8 that is stuck at this moment, dilapidated like a scrapped car. I'm afraid no one will believe that this car was brand new 7 hours ago. MMP. Lao Tzu just bought a new car in less than 7 hours. Hush. Locke came back to his senses, straightened his back, and frowned. The emergency doctor who was pulling out the shards of glass in the back saw this. "Would you like some morphine?" "Do not want." Locke directly refused. "I can hold on. Federal drug abuse is too bad. The ghost knows if he will suddenly become addicted to morphine. After all, Locke couldn't even quit drinking. Again. He has a talent for tenacity. The third-level tenacity talent is enough to ensure that as long as he is not fatally injured, he can be resurrected with full blood. Actually, if it was Locke alone, the shock wave of the explosion would not have hurt him at all. But there was Gwen. This is not. In order to protect Gwen, Locke's back is like a hedgehog with backstabs. Fortunately, the quality of Locke's casual suit jacket is guaranteed, and most of the glass fragments are blocked. Otherwise, Locke could change his name to Backstab K. "Blame me." "Fine." Locke waved his hand, but Gwen felt very guilty. If Locke hadn't tried to protect him, he wouldn't have turned into a hedgehog. To say that it is a hedgehog is an exaggeration. Only the jacket connected to the shirt inside was completely useless, but even if it didn't cost, Locke had to wear it. Let's put it this way. There is meat residue. Okay, let's move on and have a look. Okay. Locke nodded and got up. With Chiguo on his upper body, his 8-pack ABS were clearly evident. "Show off your powerful charm as a male." Gwen blinked at Locke's 8-pack ABS. "Body, is that good?" Helen also walked out of the apartment at this time, and was stunned when she saw Locke's figure. A 16-year-old child, this figure. It's illegal. Thinking like this, Helen tapped Gwen on the head, and then handed the shirt to Locke. "Here, let's see if it fits." Locke was stunned for a moment, moved his limbs and looked at Helen. "Thank you, but I'll just go home and change it." Helen didn't speak. She unfolded her shirt, and it seemed that she was going to wear it for Locke directly. Locke quickly took it and put it on himself. It doesn't matter if he wears George's shirt, if it's for Helen to help him wear it. Good guy. Locke feels that this is the rhythm that he wants to be prosperous. But it fits quite well. Locke looked at it, except that the sleeves were a little longer and the size was a little bigger. There was nothing bad about it. "Contact the aviation side. I want to know any aircraft that flew over this head within half an hour." "Clear." George, who was not far away, was talking to his deputy, then walked over, looked at Locke who was wearing his shirt, and said nothing, patted Locke on the shoulder. "Yes, thank you." Obviously, George was protecting Gwen when Sherlock was at a critical moment. At this time, George looked at Locke with a look that was obviously better than before. Even with so much appreciation. After all, what Locke just showed was very much in line with George's vision. The emergency doctor seemed to know George and took off his mask directly. "It's no big problem, just the scratches, they've all been dealt with, and they'll be fine after a few days of recovery." "He is fine. But others? There is a problem." "Good guy." Could it be that Locke's natural sixth senses are better, or, if he hadn't told Gwen just now, wait for him to get in the car, and then the body is falling from the sky? This is murder. The murder of Chi Kuo. Locke looked at his appalling new car. Even if the car was repaired, he wouldn't dare to use it. "Have you been identified, Mr. Stacy?" "Not yet." George shook his head, then looked at Locke. "But don't worry, we will investigate this matter with all our strength." There was no way to check on the spot. This is all scum. How to check? Until now, none of the fingerprints of the meat residue have been found. Locke glanced at the scene and didn't expect any news immediately, so he nodded. "Well, since that's the case, Mr. Stacy, can I go back first?" George went to the emergency doctor. "On this question, it is better to listen to professionals." The emergency doctor said, "There is no big problem, and they didn't face the shock wave directly. It's just that the picture looks a little scary, but in fact, it's all scratches. It's enough to go back to recuperate for 2 days. George looked at Locke and said, "Do you need me to issue a leave request for you?" Locke said with a smile, "I don't need a leave of absence note. However, I may have to trouble Mr. Stacy to send a policeman to take me back. After all, you know," said. Locke pointed to his Audi R8, which had only been put up for 7 hours, and had already completed his mission, which was destined to be scrapped. "MMP. Don't let me know who you are." Ding. The mission is being generated. Mission, Injustice and Debt, 1/2 quest completion rewards, achievement points 1000, potential points 1000, 10% off treasure refresh coupon *1 mission description, it's not about the car. After an hour. Locke smiled and waved goodbye to the police officer who specially sent him to the door. The policeman left his phone number just in case Locke had any discomfort. Soon. Wait until the police officer enters the elevator and leaves. Close the door. Locke's face suddenly darkened. Taking off his shirt, Locke walked into the bathroom, twisted his body, and carefully untied the bandage he had just wrapped around him. Into the eye. The dozen or so fragments that were originally left behind have disappeared without a trace. Level 3 tenacity, so terrifying. Good dong. Locke walked out of the bathroom, took out a bottle of bourbon from inside the bar, poured a glass, and drank it directly. Ordinary 16-year-olds cannot buy alcohol. But Locke is no ordinary man. The next second, Locke raised his head and looked at the study on the second floor. Inside the study, it's still the special computer of the Continental Hotel. Chi Guo put on lock on his upper body, and directly clicked on a chat software on the computer. Wu Shuang, in. I'm not the Red Devil, speak. Wushuan, there is a corpse in Manhattan tonight. I want to know all the news about him. I'm not the Red Devil, wait a minute. Locke looked at the message and leaned back in the computer chair. The New York Police Department has the New York Police Department's investigation methods. The dark world also exists. Even many times, the information of the dark world comes much faster than the agencies on the bright side. If it wasn't for Locke's inability to speculate in stocks, taking advantage of the speed of information transmission in the dark world, it would be possible to mix a wave of the stock market. Of course, the information of the dark world is true and false. However, the source of information that Locke talked about is still very good. When Locke was in Texas, he had several transactions with this intelligence agent, and he could be regarded as a pleasant business partner. Locke also took orders from this guy several times in private. Anyway, Locke does not refuse to come, as long as the order he places allows the system to perform tasks, he will accept it. As for who is this guy? Locke seriously suspects that this guy is the Red Devil, the legendary goalkeeper of the dark world. Of course, it was definitely not the Red Devil who was talking to him. It should be a salesman under the Red Devils. After all, the Red Devil's name is much louder than Locke's, and he still eats intelligence food. Almost every second, people are looking for the Red Devil to do business. Locke is just one of them. After a while, replied. I'm not the Red Devil, 100,000. Wushuan, are you stealing money? Who is it? Intelligence is so expensive. Good guy. Wushuan, I know your boss, let me give you a discount, everyone has been working together for so many years. I'm not the Red Devil, wait a minute. Wushuan, okay. Locke touched the chin that finally started to grow a beard again, and looked at the message on the computer screen. Is an identity worth 100,000? Do you really think that money is not money? Although it's quick money to be a killer, Locke has spent a lot these 2 days. Let's put it this way. If Locke doesn't take orders from now on, by this time next year, he will watch the IRS drive a tank and come to him to chat because he can't pay the property tax. I'm not the Red Devil, I asked the boss, the boss said, "You are our friend, this information can be given to you for free. No matter what you are doing, you are either a traitor or a thief." Wu Shuang, the price. "I'm not the Red Devil, next time, if there is an order, help us complete it for free, and exchange it at an equivalent value. If this information is exceeded, we will make up the difference." Wushuan, no problem. Locke said directly by typing. There is no love and hate in this world for no reason. He also doesn't want to be cheap. After all, free things have been thoroughly proven, and the more free things are, the higher the cost. Fair enough. Equivalent exchange. That's what he does. It doesn't matter who he kills, as long as the system can perform missions. As long as the system performs missions, he will be judged as a bad person. If he kills him, there is no psychological pressure. In this world, after all, someone needs to uphold justice. So, why can't that person be me? Soon. A ding-dong sound. Locke opened his mailbox in the dark world and clicked in. She raised her eyebrows. WTF? Gallagher Abel, male, 35 years old, alias Mr. Y, Dark World, New York Brotherhood assassin. What's the situation? Mr. Y? Fraternity? Assassin? Peer? What are you doing? Ding. Mission completed, Injustice and Debt Quest Reward, Achievement Point 1000, Potential Point 1000, Treasure Refresh Ticket *1 ding. Task Generation. New Mission, My Life is Up to Me. Quest Reward, Achievement Point 2000, Potential Point 2000, Treasure Refresh Coupon *1 Task Description. In this world, there is such a magical textile machine. According to legend, this textile machine brings the will of God. There is a group of people who save 10, 100, or even 1,000 people by killing one person. Practice your beliefs, and they will remove any name that appears on the loom. What if your name appears? Remarks: You are a player, Yu reading www.yuuganju.com. If this world has a destiny, then this destiny is not qualified to judge you. W.T.F. Locke frowned. Textile machine? Fraternity? Wanted? Just kidding, how could Lao Tzu's name appear on the loom of fate? Locke raised his eyebrows with an expression of disbelief. Isn't that fate loom a fake? Locke has naturally seen the movie Wanted. Similarly, he also knows that there is a fraternity here, and he even plans to find a way to visit after he has stabilized his feet in New York for a while. After all, spear throwing is a unique skill. Brotherhood's signature skill. But I haven't gone to the textile factory to study yet, my dear. Tell me now, Lao Tzu's name has been tinkered with by the fate loom? Did I offend that old nigger? Locke blinked, thinking about such a question in his mind. Not right. The Destiny textile machine seems to be real at the beginning. It was not faked by Sloane, and Sloane is indeed doing his best to practice his so-called justice with the name on the Destiny textile machine. It seems that after Sloane discovered his name came out, Sloane's mentality completely exploded, and then he chose to start forging, using the fate loom as an excuse to make a profit for himself. So, the fate textile machine can't actually be false, but Sloane will turn the fake into the real? That is to say, Destiny to kill me? Locke raised his eyebrows. Destiny? Ah. The next day. Early in the morning. Hey! Locke, who had just taken a shower, looked at a few missed calls and raised his eyebrows. After connecting, he realized that the call was from Gwen. It should be the police officer who asked for it yesterday, and then gave it to George Stacy. After that, Gwen knew it. Okay. Go downstairs. Locke raised his eyebrows as he looked at George Stacy's police car parked not far away. This car. Sit up, Alexander. Locke opened the car door and said to George, who was driving, "Excuse me, Mr. Stacy. Be polite. Locke has always been very polite. Under normal circumstances, parking is not allowed here, and you have to pay a ticket. However, who made it parked here is a police car, and it is the New York Police Department Sheriff George Stacy who is driving. Who dares to issue a fine? Do you want to live? Arrived at school. Goodbye, Dad. Gwen waved at George, waited until George drove away, then looked at Locke and asked with concern, Locke, are you really okay? After all, yesterday's picture of the back full of broken glass was still quite shocking. Locke said, the doctor also said that it was a bruise. I ran to the hospital and I couldn't even get a leave of absence. Gwen smiled, thank you, Locke. Locke. Okay. This time it was his turn to be Taylor. Because of the first class in the morning, Gwen was entangled by Kim, who asked for leave yesterday. Without him. Yesterday Gwen left in Locke's Audi R8. The news had already spread throughout Midtown College, and this morning, it was witnessed that the two were specially driven by Sheriff George Stacy. From a certain point of view, this matter is considered a stone hammer of love. And it's the kind that has been approved by the parents. Kim is envious of this, although her parents were divorced and she lived with her mother. Her father, who always felt mysterious, disciplined her very strictly. Gwen was a little speechless about Ken's inquiry. Looking at Ken, who had been entangled in him all morning, he said speechlessly, I said, you asked for leave yesterday, I can only partner with Locke. It's all Ken's fault. Okay. Gwen suddenly thought that if Kim hadn't asked for leave yesterday, then she wouldn't have been with Locke yesterday, and if she hadn't been with Locke, then Locke wouldn't have gone to her house. If so, in that case, Locke would not be in danger. It's all Kim's fault. Standing next to him, Kim was stunned when he saw Gwen's eyes. What's going on? Really? What do you think? Gwen shook his head, please, Locke has only come to our school for 2 days. As a student assistant, it is normal for me to help new classmates. Kim looked at the expression on Gwen's face, and his eyes drifted to Locke, who was sitting not far away to eat. Then I'll ask Locke. Said. Taking advantage of Gwen's stupefied effort, Kim walked towards Locke with his dinner plate in his hand. Locke. Locke, who was looking at his phone, raised his head, watched Feng Huo 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 Huo. This Kim's background is not small. Locke seriously doubted whether the Midtown High School he came to was fake. There are no spiders in this school. Gwen's best friend is Kim. The Kim rescued by the hurricane. Kim blinked at Gwen, who was sitting next to him, then looked at Locke. Locke, are you and Gwen dating? Shrimp? Locke looked at Gwen with some curiosity. Gwen pushed Kim. Don't talk nonsense, Locke and I are very blue and white. Locke nodded, expressing his second opinion. Kim said, you're sure, Gwen is the flower of our school. Locke said, trust me, if I catch up with Gwen, I will definitely announce it to the whole world. Although he often said that women will only affect the speed of his brushing tasks. But if we can talk, Locke doesn't really mind. But not now. He was targeted by the Brotherhood. Locke has been pondering that he can't go back to the Xing Chen building until this matter is resolved. The Audi R8 that he had just bought in less than 7 hours was turned into scrap metal. He didn't want it. The house he bought at a huge price was also turned into ruins in less than 72 hours. Gwen glanced at Locke out of the corner of the eye. Announce it to the world? But if you are in love, you can actually. Gwen thought about it. Last night, in the ambulance, Chi Kuokuo had 8-pack ABS on his body, and Chi Kuokuo showed off his masculine charm. Gwen quickly changed the subject. Are you really all right? Locke nodded. It's really okay. The wound on his back has healed. Let alone this kind of bruise, even a bullet wound, under the third-level tenacity talent, a night of hard work is enough to heal. After listening to the conversation between the two, Ken felt a little strange. After Ken learned of last night's experience from Gwen, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. I also seem to have a hero who can appear in front of me and protect me in a crisis. You have. Your father is. Locke glanced at Kem, and Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com said so in his heart. Gwen heard the joke from Kem's words, knocked Kem directly, and then looked at Locke. Locke, this week, Ken and I are going to Osborne's biological interview, and you too bar. Interview. Well, Dr. Connor's lab needs a few interns. This is a good opportunity, and it's also a good social practice. Gwen said so, and then introduced Dr. Connors. Locke raised his eyebrows, a little moved. But Locke smiled, forget it, I have something to do this week. The matter with his car is not over yet. If he endures this matter, then his face will be lost. The task is sincere and precious, and the face value is higher. People are mixed in the rivers and lakes, and face is the first. If he doesn't pursue this matter, someone will smash his car today, and tomorrow, someone might dare to at his door. It is bearable, but unbearable. In fact, even if people from the Brotherhood didn't come to him, he would come to ask for an explanation. Gwen was stunned for a moment, a little regretful. Really, that's a pity. He thought that Locke would also think this was a good opportunity. In the afternoon, someone from the insurance company called. After Locke walked out of the school gate, he saw a brand new Audi R8 not far away. The insurance company handed the key to Locke, then turned and left. Half a sound. The unique sound of the Audi R8 roared, and Locke also drove straight away from the school. When Locke came to New York from Texas, he had already figured out the environment around New York from the satellite map. A series of plans have also been prepared. Exactly. One of these plans can now be used. Straight hook fishing. In the suburbs of New York, after driving over the bridge, it directly entered the countryside of New Jersey across the Manhattan River. After half an hour, Locke parked the vehicle in the parking lot of a large warehouse supermarket, and then called a taxi. New Jersey Waterworks. Okay. The driver quickly took Locke on the road. The New Jersey water plant is considered to be in the suburbs. However, this water plant has been abandoned. Basically, except for young people who like to explore, no one usually goes there. Soon, Locke paid the fare and got out of the car. The taxi turned around and left in a hurry. Locke looked at the taxi leaving, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. That's it. I'm just a cute 16-year-old little Gengtai, can I have any bad intentions, as for? Locke lowered his head and smiled, turned around, and walked directly into the waterworks. 5 minutes later. That taxi, go back and forth. Crack. A middle-aged bald killer sitting in the car, also known as the Butcher, pinned his pistol and looked at the taxi driver. You're sure you saw him go in? The taxi driver nodded. Don't worry, he was in the car just now, and his mobile phone has been hacked. It has been located and it is inside. Just after training Wesley, the Butcher, who had nothing to do for the time being, blinked. A 16-year-old high school student who just transferred from school, how could he come here? The taxi driver shook his head. He's just the bottom of the fraternity, to put it bluntly, a killer trainee. The kind of low-level intern who can't shoot a gun. In the Brotherhood, those who are qualified to perform missions are all skilled in throwing spears. But he has been studying for 2 years and still can't. After all, he is not Wesley, and he is not qualified to let the boss of the textile factory spend a lot of time and energy to make it fast. A killer like him is usually a guest employee, and sometimes belongs to that kind of intelligence collector. A cruel smile appeared on the butcher's fat face. Okay, wait for me here. The killer in turn nodded and said, okay. Get off. The butcher looked around and confirmed that no one was there, and walked directly towards the water plant. In his opinion, he is probably another idiot who likes to go to these no man's places to play some kind of adventure game. Exactly. It also saves the need for finishing touches after killing them. Enter the waterworks. The butcher's footsteps began to slow down, and he looked at the mobile phone in his hand, which showed a small red dot. The location of Locke's mobile phone. Only. When the butcher saw the mobile phone placed on top of an abandoned iron bucket not far away, he was slightly stunned. What? The butcher walked over, the phone just turned on, and he caught his eye. It's been a long wait. What's the situation? The butcher narrowed his eyes and turned around. A little cold light came first. Then, boom! Locke jumped directly from the iron frame above, and in midair, his right foot was like a raptor exploring a cave. With a bang, he directly kicked the butcher's pistol into the air. The spear-throwing technique of the textile factory is all about the gun. Locke knew very well that if he had just shot with the killer of the textile factory, he would be the one who would lose in the end. He wouldn't let the bullet turn. Not right now. Bang bang. The butcher was already alert at the moment he turned around. Although Locke kicked off the pistol accidentally, the butcher's melee skills were also very good. He is strong enough and strong enough. Ili Jiangshui is the most appropriate term to describe a butcher. Bang! Bang! The butcher moved his neck, thinking loudly, looking at Locke in front of him. The corners of his mouth grinned. Interesting, I thought it was an ordinary high school student, but I didn't expect it. Locke also raised the corner of his mouth. I don't know yet. When I first came to New York, I would be missed by the Brotherhood. I feel that I have too much face. Yes. The butcher smiled cruelly, just like a tank. He rammed over. I will treat you well. Die. Boom. What? The butcher quickly ducked to the side, and instantly, like a fat pig falling to the ground, countless dust was splashed. But... boom. 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 The silver dancer in Locke's hand clasped his hair again and again, expressionless. Little cuties burst out from the muzzle of the gun one after another, shooting flames that swept the butcher whose flexibility obviously did not match his size. Shabai will only play melee combat with you. Locke is very poor now. When he came to New York, he brought so many sets of clothes. What if it got dirty? Boom. What? The butcher roared in a low voice, turned over, and hid behind an iron bucket with the injured leg that was shot. Then, a butcher's knife flashing with cold light was thrown out. Bang! The butcher's knife fell to the ground and hit the ground for 3 points. The next second. Boom! Boom! Locke's eyes shrank, and with a flash, he could almost clearly see that a bright yellow bullet flew past his body in front of his eyes, and then slammed into the distance unabated. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com child. The butcher said loudly, you wouldn't think that I only have one. Boom. The butcher's eyes shrank, lowered his head, and looked at a gun muzzle that appeared on his chest in disbelief. How? Possible. Locke walked up to the butcher with a blank face, looked at the butcher with his head down and his chest, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. You don't think I'll just go straight? Butcher. Intermediate rubbing card, the game store sells for 5W achievement points. Using the treasure refresh coupon has a chance to get a 10% discount. After successful use, the skills used by NPCs will be rubbed immediately, and the skill level will be converted according to the level of the rubbing object. The rubbing was successful. Spear sling, blue quality, intermediate, ordinary marksmanship, straight and straight, nothing new, but your marksmanship is fancy and extremely deadly. Although Locke's ideal rubbing object is the cross. But Locke investigated last night, the cross had defected, and Wesley had entered the factory. At the moment? Intermediate, not bad. You. The butcher was obviously a little out of breath, and the staring boss seemed to want to ask Locke why he could also throw the spear, but perhaps considering that this was too long, when it came to his mouth, it became, "Who are you?" Locke squatted down in front of the butcher, staring at the butcher's eyes that were beginning to scatter, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. "I want to know, I won't tell you." The words fell. Locke raised his gun. Boom.